Rearranging with squares and square roots. So I'm going to go through examples where you have either a squared in it and you have to rearrange it, or with a square root. Now, just a quick thing about square roots. If I write down what is square root of 4, okay, obviously the answer is 2, isn't it? Okay, because 2 times 2 makes 4, and square root of 9 would be 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. Now, this symbol in mathematics means that you take always the positive answer, because in fact, if you think about it, minus 2 times minus 2 is also 4. So we could say that minus 2 is the square root of 4, but when we use this symbol, we always take the positive, okay? Now, the reason that becomes important is because if we have to solve an equation, something like x squared equals 4, okay, obviously we need to square root both sides. If we have the square of something, we can square root and we'll just get x back. And if we square root the other side, yeah, but when we square root the whole of one side, we need to put a plus minus at the front, because actually there are two solutions to this, plus or minus 2. Okay, so whenever you square something and introduce a square root, just remember to put a plus minus at the front, because actually there's two solutions. 2 times 2 is 4, that works, and minus 2 times minus 2 is also 4, so both of these are correct. But if you are given a question where they just have a square root, you just take the positive number, yeah? Okay, so let's go back and have a look. So for example, let's do some examples with squareds in them first. So if I have a question like x squared plus t equals a. Okay, so what we want to do is to make it so that the whole of one side is x squared in this case. So we want to take the plus t to the other side and make it a minus t. So we have x squared a minus t. And now you can see that on the left we have the whole of this side is being squared. And when that happens, we square root both sides. So it becomes the square root of everything on this side. We don't really need brackets because we just make the square root sign longer to show that it's all under the square root. And we need to put a plus minus at the front. Okay, so this is how you rearrange for x in this situation. Okay, let's try another one. What would happen if I had something like that? Well, obviously then we would have x squared is p plus the 2a, and then we would square root both sides, so we'd have square root p plus 2a, and we remember to put a plus minus in the front. Okay, slightly more complicated would be if we had 2x squared, let's say minus t equals y or something like that. So again, what we're going to do is add t to both sides. So take this to this side and add it. So we have 2x squared y plus t. Now be careful here, because a lot of students will say, right, I need to square root because I've got x squared. But the whole of the left-hand side is not being squared. This 2 is not being squared. Okay, so we need to take that to the other side first. Okay, so we divide both sides by 2 first. So it would be y plus t all divided by 2. And now we can do the square rooting. So we square root everything, yeah, on the right hand side, because it's everything on the left hand side is being squared. So that's fine to do that. And obviously put plus minus in front. Okay, so all the questions you've been doing before, it's very similar, but just now the last step is going to be square rooting. Okay. Now let's look at slightly more complicated one. If I had something like x plus 1 all squared minus 2t equals y, let's something like that. Now again, you can see that we can move the minus 2t to the side first. So we're going to end up with y plus 2t. Now we have to think ourselves, what are we going to get rid of first? Are we going to subtract 1 or are we going to square root? Well, this time we need to square root first because the x plus 1, that's kind of trapped inside the squared. The whole of the left-hand side is being squared. So that means you can square root both sides. So if we square root this side, we'll just have x plus 1. And when we square root the other side, we will have this. And don't forget, we need to put the plus minus. But we still have to get rid of the plus 1. So we take that to the other side. And it will become a minus 1. So we have plus or minus square root y plus 2t. And then we're going to take away 1 from the whole of that. Okay, let's do a couple more. Something like this. So again, we need, well, what I would do here is, because we've got minus 3x squared, if you take it to the side, it will become plus. And I'm going to bring the t to this side and it'll be a minus t. So I have 5 minus t equals 3x squared. Now I can divide by 3. And then finally I can square root both sides. Not forgetting to put the plus minus. Okay, so let's try something else. Something like this. Excuse me. So we have to think about what can we do to both sides. So can you see that this plus 1 is totally separate? It's been added to everything else on that side. So you can basically subtract 1 from both sides to make that disappear. So we have 3x squared over 5 equals t minus 1. Now, of course, a good idea would be to take the 5 and multiply the other side by 5. So we have 3x squared, 5, and yet everything is going to be times by 5, so you need to put the brackets in. Now, if we want to, we can multiply that out. So if you remember how to do it, you're making everything in the bracket 5 times bigger. So it's 5 times t and 5 times minus 1. So it becomes that. Okay, now of course we can't square root yet because of this 3. That 3 is not being squared, it's only the x that's being squared. So we need to divide both sides by 3. So we know we can take this down and divide the whole of the right hand side by 3. And now finally we can do the square rooting. So we have square root of 5t minus 5 over 3. And we need to put the plus minus at the front to make it correct. Okay, let's do one last one. Okay, so we have a fraction equal to a fraction, yeah? So we basically need to move things around. So we know we can take the b up to and multiply it on the top of the other side. And this a can go down here and be multiplied on the bottom here. So what we're going to get is x squared is b times t on the top over, and the a times the 3, so 3a. And now we're left with the whole of the left hand side squared. So we know we can square root. So we have square root bt over 3a and plus minus at the front.